Hi, everyone. It's Terry Bruce, and this is another 10-minute nonprofit evaluation tips. This month, we're talking about what is evaluation. And I posited to you during this month's blog post that evaluation is not research studies, it's not forms or um, interviews or a strategic plan. It is much more than that. It is an ecosystem that is made up of kind of these 5 different dimensions that are each a subsystem unto themselves that contain myriad component parts. Now, continuing with this discussion about what is evaluation, I want to present to you a couple of case studies about how evaluation looks and can work. And this week, we're going to start with a case study that involves an organization that I worked for many years ago, actually. And in that organization, there was a weekly orientation that people had to come to in order to access services at the organization. And I was one of 4 staff people who did that weekly orientation. We would rotate, so I only had to do it once a month, and each of the staff only did it once a month. And at the end of the workshop or orientation, we would hand everybody who attended a form, a customer satisfaction form, and we would have them fill it out. It was anonymous. They did not have to put their names on it. And there was a bunch of questions on a scale of 1 to 5. How satisfied are you with today's workshop? And a place for them to write comments at the bottom. They would flip over the paper, leave it at their spot, and then leave. And then once they all left, I would go through, I would collect all the feedback forms. I would glance at them to see if anybody said that I did a horrible job and make sure everybody was pretty happy. And then the process was that I would walk those forms, that handful of forms, down the hall to my boss's office, where he would look at them immediately. If I did not immediately show up, if I went to the bathroom first or went for a break or tried to bring him the forms after lunch, he would seek me out. He wanted those forms immediately, and there was to be no variance in the delivery of those forms. He would glance through the forms very quickly, and he had told me once he was looking for 2 things, that he never looked at the good, the 5s, because he knew I was doing a great job and that I was wonderful. So he didn't care about any of the 5s. What he was looking for was anybody who gave low ratings, because he wanted to know what happened. Did I have a problem with that person? Did I have an inkling that they were unhappy? Why did something go awry? So he would immediately pull that one out and he'd say, what's up with this? Now, it was a fairly small cohort of people who would be attending, usually like 10 to 15. And because they left their forms where they were sitting, it wasn't truly anonymous. And generally, if one person had a problem with me as their facilitator, a workshop presenter, I would know who that person was. So this would not be a surprise. So I'd be like, oh yeah, that was Brian. And here's the deal with Brian. He was mandated to come here. He was not happy. He was just rude and disruptive and dismissive the whole time. And I did my best with him, but he was just not having it. My boss would say, okay, thank you for telling me. Go put that in the data management system, put in a little note that, Brian was, just kind of a pain in the butt today. And then also send me an email with that recap as well. The reason he did this, that I had asked him, why, was he said, in case we ever get any blowback, if Brian is so upset that he goes in and complains to the executive director, the board, maybe the mayor, in the community, and the public starts posting bad reviews of us or whatever, my boss wanted to be able to get out in front of it and not be taken by surprise and say, yeah, okay, but this is what happened specifically. Like, Brian was a jerk and he was just not happy, but everybody else in his session was perfectly happy. The second thing he was looking for was suggestions for improvement. So if somebody said, the workshop was great, but I had to miss a lot of it because I had to keep going feeding the parking meters every 30 minutes, because there's only 30-minute meters all around your office. Could you guys get longer meters, or it was too hot, or it was too cold, or the time of day was terrible, or whatever it was? If there was actionable feedback on process improvement, then he would take that and make changes to the program service, the workshop, the organization, whatever it was. All right, so that's the case study. My question for you is that evaluation what we were doing there? Administering customer feedback form, looking at the forms, the raw data, leafing through them, picking out the bad feedback, and then, kind of documenting it and or utilizing it. Was that evaluation? We played the Jeopardy theme here for a minute. I'll give you a minute to think about that. Would you call that evaluation? Now, those of you who have worked with me for any length of time know I love to ask trick questions. Questions never have an easy answer. So in this case, I have defined for you that evaluation is a process that completes an entire circuit around the outside dial here. So did those customer satisfaction surveys and the process of administering those lead to a complete circuit around the dial? If so, then it's evaluation. If not, it was not evaluation. All right, well, the end result of those feedback forms was utilization, right? My boss was making decisions. He was making improvements to programs and services at the organization based on the feedback we were getting. Somebody complained about the parking meters. He went to City Hall, asked for parking passes that we could waive the fees, the parking meters for 2 or 3 people to attend the workshop. We received those parking passes, and then people could park for the full 2 hours and not have to run out in the middle of the workshop. So utilization was happening. There was decision making happening. Certainly there was distribution, right? I would walk the forms over to my boss. So he was getting the data. He was getting the raw data. There was analysis happening. He's looking through and saying, you're doing a great job, Terry, based on the fact that most of the feedback forms were 5s all the time. And then for doing an analysis of this person had a bad experience. Why? Was it, did Terry do something bad, or the client just was not happy? So there was analysis. Certainly the data was being collected. We're adding notes to a case management system. And then we were storing the documents, the forms in a filing cabinet. Evaluation schema. Did we have a research question? Yes. Were people satisfied with the workshop? And we had a form and a way to administer the form and collect that data. And was the evaluation schema tied directly to the program? Yes, we were evaluating if people were satisfied with that particular program, and also the organization, because there were questions like, were you greeted promptly at the front desk? And was the front desk staff warm and welcoming? As well as, was the facilitator, mindful of your needs and considerate, and not rude and abrupt, and a nice person? And did you learn stuff today? And if you needed a reasonable accommodation, were you accommodated? So we made a full loop around the dial, which means that was evaluation. Now, as you listen to this story, though, in this case study, I'm sure you were thinking, there are a lot of improvements that could be made, right? Were people feeling empowered to be honest and give their honest feedback when it was clear that those evaluations were not anonymous? They were turning the paper over and leaving it right at the seat where they were. Every once in a while, somebody, a participant, would take it upon themselves to collect all the forms and smush them up to randomize them and then hand me the whole stack. But most people would just leave it where they were sitting and get up and leave as soon as they finished filling it out. So we could pick that apart. We could pick apart the fact that my boss was looking at a snapshot. He looked at each workshop individually, but there was no collation of data across time periods to see if numbers were going up or down. Was I consistently having, if consistently every workshop I was having a problem person and none of the other facilitators were, maybe I wasn't doing such a great job. But he was just looking at everything one snapshot in time. So certainly there's a lot of process improvement around who was getting the data and the format in which the data was being distributed. Certainly the data, I don't believe, was ever making it vertically in the organization. I don't think the executive director ever saw those forms or kind of the feedback, or if there were any patterns of repeated feedback. The board, outside partners, nobody else in the organization. Certainly if somebody said that the front desk person was rude or there wasn't enough seating in the front area, my boss was making unilateral decisions. That was not discussed as an organization. The parking situation. We had many programs, most of which would have benefited from free parking or 2-hour parking instead of 30-minute parking. And my boss made the change just for this particular workshop for people to be able to attend without having to feed the meter every 30 minutes. But that's something that probably should have been brought to a staff meeting and figured out that problem across the organization instead of creating these silos and kind of just spot checking. So, and even the customer satisfaction. What do we mean by satisfaction? These people were required to attend, so they came in with very low expectations about why they had to be there. So a better question might be, did you learn anything? And did this end up being a good use of your time? Or you came in being annoyed you had to be here, and you left annoyed you had to be here because you didn't get anything of value? That's a very different question than, was there adequate parking? Were you comfortable? How was the facilitator's personality and way of speaking and expressing themselves? That's process evaluation. The other is outcome evaluation. So there's definitely a lot of additional complexity that could be done on that evaluation. And so, was it evaluation? Yes. Was it good evaluation? Was it rigorous evaluation? Was it telling us anything useful? Questionable. We occasionally got good suggestions for improvement, but otherwise, yeah, it was definitely, I would call that low-hanging fruit of evaluation, possibly even fruit that fell off the tree and is laying on the ground of evaluation. Like, it was probably the lowest common denominator evaluation you could do, but it was evaluation. Versus if we had administered those feedback forms and then I just took them and put them in a filing cabinet afterwards and nobody saw them and they weren't being used to make any decisions, that would not be evaluation. That's just collecting data and warehousing it for no particular reason. So the fact that we did actually have a distribution and utilization, even though those are, anemic and underdeveloped, that makes it evaluation. And last week I talked to you about utilization and distribution often being the underdeveloped part of an organization's evaluation ecosystem. And so that's where people usually go awry. And if you have those pieces, almost always, then you are making a full loop and you're doing evaluation. And from there, you can start making tweaks and getting more robust. But the first step is to make sure you're getting that complete loop on the dial. Now, your homework this week is, I want you to take that map you made last week where you mapped out what you do have at your organization. And for everything you wrote down, if you have a strategic plan, a mission statement, if you are collecting some sort of data and you have a data management system and or doing some sort of analysis, distribution, utilization, and the design and delivery of services, I want you for each of those things to map out, does each of those make a full circuit on the dial here? If so, then that is looped into your evaluation ecosystem and it's part of a continuous process. If it starts and ends without making a full 5-button circuit, that thing is in isolation or it's in a silo and it's not connected into the ecosystem, and you need to get it connected in before you can start kind of moving the needle on making it more robust, go deeper, broader, more rigorous. But first, you got to get it into the process and you got to get it into the system where it's being connected to all the other pieces. So that's what I want you to spend your time this next week on, mapping out which of your pieces are disconnected or siloed and how you're going to get them into a system. All right, well, that's it for this week. As always, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at terrybruce@gmail.com.